The Atheist Debates Patreon project presents The Other Empty Tomb. So after I did an in-depth look at a proposed miracle healing of Marlene Klepp's, which I released last month and just made public not too long ago, somebody asked if I would do the same sort of in-depth analysis on the Miracle of Calanda. And I tried. I really tried, but there's just not much you can do with a case that took place around 1640. That's a long time ago. And so the best you can do, especially in this case where the records are in languages that I don't speak, and so I've got to trust interpretations and resources. And so I went through the Wikipedia article on it, and I went through Brian Dunning's take on it on a blog for Skeptoid. And I looked at a couple of other resources that were linked from the Wikipedia article, etc. Here's the nuts and bolts. And I'll tell you what I think at the end. I'm not going to be I don't know. I genuinely don't know, but I can tell you what I think at the end. In Calanda, Spain, around 1637 or so, it's been reported that a 20-year-old son of a farmer fell off of a cart, perhaps because he fell asleep or, fainted from the heat or whatever else, just fell off the cart, maybe just slipped. The cartwheel broke his leg, and in the process of heading to where he could potentially get healed, he spent 50 days traveling to Our Lady of the Pillar. And when he arrived, the reports say that gangrene had set in. And doctors describe the leg as very phlegmonous and gangrenous to the point, or phlegmonous and gangrenous if you want, to the point of appearing black. And basically this is a claim that gangrene has taken over this leg severely. Now, this is one of the first issues with this case, and that is from the time gangrene sets in, it can be fatal in 48 hours. It is remarkable that someone could travel 50 days. Now, maybe for the first 49 days, it hadn't actually become gangrenous, and so it was just starting to be gangrenous when he got to the hospital. We don't know. I mean, we didn't know all that much. Medical technology was not amazing. Our records and record keeping aren't great, but we just got to go with what we're told. And so that's one of the first issues. There's nothing remarkable about somebody falling off of a cart and having their leg broken, and nothing remarkable about them necessarily traveling a long distance back then to get somebody to look at it. And there's nothing remarkable about, it's gone gangrenous, we're going to have to take the leg off. And the report is that they cut off the leg 4 fingers below the knee. 4-finger width is how that's described. And this procedure, I mean, even just, I think Wikipedia article alone noted this, but other people have noted, this is incredibly painful. They evidently gave him alcohol and drug drinks, but, you don't have anesthetics and we're going to cut your limb off. And he was, calling out to the Virgin of the Pillar unceasingly and with great fervor, it's recorded. Funny that we know, exactly which saint he was calling out to, but we're missing some potentially other details. And this is clearly a Catholic story where he's going to be reaching out to a saint or whatever instead of praying to Jesus or God. The limb, after it was cut off, was buried in a plot in the hospital, and the remaining limb was cauterized with fire. That's what we have from the reports. Now, the interesting thing is that the investigation goes on to say that he stayed in the hospital for a couple of months, although I think the records show that he stayed in the hospital potentially for 5 days and then spent months outside the hospital begging. And it notes that every evening he would ask the servants for a little bit of the oil from the lamp to rub on his stub because he was convinced that it would get the Virgin of the Pillar, I think, to heal him. And eventually, over the next 2 years, he spent life as a beggar. And eventually he did begging outside of or near his parents' home. Now, a book was written in 1998 called El Miracle by Masori. And he notes that the records show that at around 10 o'clock in the evening on March 29th, 1640, it's amazing, this gentleman laid himself to rest, went to bed. Now, it's cool that we know at what time of evening, on what exact date, this guy laid down to rest. The weird thing is that he was staying at his parents', but his bed in his bedroom was occupied by a soldier from somewhere nearby that needed a place to stay. And so he basically laid out on the floor of his parents' room. So between 10:30 and 11 o'clock, his mother entered the room and saw 2 feet appearing from below the cloak that covered her son. So here's a guy that had a leg amputated, has been running around begging for a couple of years, staying at his mom's house, goes in to lay down, falls asleep, and seemingly 30 minutes or so later, his mom comes in and is shocked to see 2 feet sticking out from underneath the covers. This prompted an investigation. She initially thought that the soldier was sleeping in there, and so she woke him up, found out it was her son, and he woke up. Some minutes passed until he woke up from a deep sleep. Sounds to me like somebody got drunk and fell asleep on mom's floor, but some minutes passed until he woke up from a deep sleep. He told them that he dreamt of being with the sanctuary of Our Lady of the Pillar and rubbing his leg with the holy oil as he has done so often. Soon all three agreed that the restoration of the leg was due to the intercession of the Virgin of the Pillar. So the guy's mom notices he's got 2 legs, wakes him up, and is like, "What the hell's going on? You got 2 legs." And he's like, What? I was dreaming of the sanctuary of Our Lady of the Pillar and rubbing my leg with oil, and she must have healed it. The local judge, assisted by a couple surgeons, examined this individual. They started taking notes. Eventually, on April 25th, in Zaragoza, they were there to give thanks to Our Lady of the Pillar. And then April 27th, 1641, the Archbishop of Zaragoza pronounced a judgment after an investigation, thereby officially declaring the authenticity of the miracle. At the end of the year, he was also invited to the royal court at Madrid, where King Philip IV knelt down and kissed the leg. Recordings also show that the restored leg was the same one that had been amputated 2.5 years earlier, because you could identify bruises and scars that were there before the amputation. Now, I'm going to take this as a translation error or a colloquial thing, because if you've got bruises that were on a leg 2.5 years ago, and your leg gets cut off and restored, and the same bruises are there, something else is wrong. Bruises, generally speaking, don't last for 2.5 years. So maybe bruise is a bad translation, that it could be, scars and other identifying remarks on there, maybe, birthmarks, who knows. But it also says that the hole in the cemetery in the hospital at Zaragoza, in which the leg had been buried, was excavated and found empty. This is amazing. This is truly, we have a miracle. Now, as I mentioned, Brian Dunning on Skeptoid posited the following story, which I'm going to say I think is perfectly acceptable. Brian did make some mistakes, but ended up correcting some of those. the story that he suggests is, first of all, nobody's going to make it 55 days with gangrene. You're going to be dead. But to be fair, it doesn't say that it was necessarily 55 days of gangrene. And as I noted, maybe it got turned gangrenous just before he got to the hospital or the medical facility. It's a big deal. But also, there's witnesses that claim they knew him with one leg. But I don't know how you know that. And Dunning's potential explanation is this. And I'll just read it for a couple paragraphs here and talk about what I agree with, what I don't. He says, allow me to offer an alternative version of what might have happened that requires no miraculous intervention and is still consistent with all the documentary evidence we have here. Pellicero's leg was broken in the accident, as witnessed and reported, but like most broken legs, did not develop gangrene. His uncle took him to the hospital at Valencia, where he spent 5 days, during which his uncle presumably went back to his farm, and his broken leg was set. The next 50 days he spent convalescing as his leg mended. Unable to work during this time, he was forced to earn a living as a beggar and found that the broken leg did wonders for the collection of alms. Once his leg was sound, he reasoned that if a broken leg was good, a missing leg would be even better. So he bound his right foreleg up behind his thigh, got a hold of a wooden leg, traveled to Zaragoza, home of the great basilica, someplace where he wasn't known, for 2 years, and enjoyed the relative financial success of panhandling among the basilica's devotees as an amputee with a sad story. All of that is completely plausible, unsurprising, and the sort of stuff we've seen before and made fun of. If you go watch the beginning of Trading Places, that's what Eddie Murphy's character is doing, rolling around, as if he's limbless when his limbs are just tucked underneath him. That's not outside the realm of possibility at all. Dunning continues, eventually he made it back to Calanda, where his plans were accidentally foiled when the existence of his complete sound leg was revealed when his parents saw his feet sticking out of his blanket. At that point, the miracle story was a perfect cover. Many, many people had known him as a man with one leg, and now everyone could plainly see he had two. There was no way he could lose. Dunning goes on to say, I'm not accusing Miguel of being a fraud, but I'm pointing out that there's a far more probable explanation. Dunning's error here, which he's partially corrected, was when he said, note that no evidence exists that his leg was ever amputated or that he was even treated at all. That's actually not entirely true. In the record, there were a couple of doctors, the ones that are cited in the main story. And one of the doctors said, Dr. Estanga testified that he affirmed that he remembered a young man coming to the hospital with an injured leg some 2.5 years prior, but did not know that young man's name. That makes sense. He remembers recommending amputation and testified that he believed it had been carried out by practitioners and nurses, but did not claim any firsthand knowledge. With regard to Miguel Juan Pellicero by name, Estanga testified knowing him as a young amputee with a wooden peg and a crutch, and that he'd often come to the hospital, not for treatment, but to sit in the chapel. I don't think anybody was necessarily setting up a story or anything else, but you think about it, when you start coming up with potential explanations for how something like this, could lead people to, or what's the best explanation for this story? Well, some people might go to, well, maybe he had a twin brother. We don't need to do anything at all like that. I think Dunning's story is probably largely correct. His error in saying that there wasn't evidence of amputation or treatment is slightly incorrect. But I think there's a number of explanations that could go to explain this in great detail. Let's just stick with Brian's one possible route rather than trying to invent an entirely different scenario. So guy breaks his leg while he's recovering. He gets sympathy for his broken leg, figures out that he's perhaps even making more or doing okay with alms and donations in the big city than he was just, working out on on the farm, not saying this is lucrative or planned or anything like that. Then eventually he's just living his life for a couple years, binding his leg up and running around with a wooden limb. And, nobody wants to investigate. Nobody's going to be like, okay, pull your pants down. Show me that this is a real injury. Show me that you actually don't have a leg, so that you're not just faking it. And at some point, goes back to his parents' home. Seemingly, I'm going to say that maybe he got drunk and passed out, considering they made a big deal about how he was in a very heavy sleep, and so didn't keep his leg covered like he suspected. His mom notices it, and he invents the miracle story. What are people supposed to say if we have a 2-year history of this person, unknown to all of us, faking an injury in order to beg, not living around us, not doing anything, and we just all know him as this one-legged dude, and now he's got his leg back? Well, in 1640, that's probably just an almost automatic miracle claim. I don't even know what you could expect. Doctors can't be expected years later to remember a specific patient and everything that went on and verify that the person standing in front of them is in fact the same patient. How would you verify that this is the same person? You don't have DNA records to investigate. You don't have photographs. You have, a couple years ago, I think somebody showed up with, I remember... Yeah, don't you remember we did an amputation, or we recommended an amputation on some young kid? Yeah. What if they'd have been asked if there was someone who came in with a broken leg? Do they remember that person? You're more likely to remember an amputation than you are a broken leg. And when presented with no other way to track it, you could say, oh, I think there was something like that. And that's basically what we have in the record from the doctors. I had a triple bypass, open heart surgery. I met the surgeon for a couple of minutes. If you took all of my medical records and got rid of all the stuff that is modern, photographs, x-rays, recorded footage of the event, all of those things, and any of the modern means by which you could identify that it was me, and went to my surgeon today, it's been about 2.5 years, and said, hey, do you remember like a 52, 53-year-old dude who came in and you had to do a triple bypass? And is this the guy? I don't think you could show him a picture of me or stand me up in front of him, and he would not have any hope of identifying that I was the guy he worked on, even if he, pretty strongly remembered the event. It's just not the way it works. And while I have a nice scar, and he might be able to recognize his particular handiwork with, sutures and stuff like that, maybe he puts a special stitch in there so that he can identify one of his, who knows? If in fact I had been completely healed, now there's no scar. Is he going to say, yeah, I remember that guy. I remember cutting his chest open. Wow, there's no scar? Must be a miracle. It's preposterous to think that in 1640, a doctor is going to be able to say, yes, that's the guy who came in with a broken gangrenous leg 2.5 years ago. I remember ordering it to be cut off. I remember him begging outside. Yep, that's all correct. And that means now that his leg's back, the only explanation is that it's a miracle. So here's the thing. There's a website, Why Won't God Heal Amputees? And it's a fine case of pointing out that the prevalency of miracles is indirectly correlated to our ability to investigate them and having better and stronger evidence. And, there's miracle, and then there's a huge dip when cameras are invented, and then when Photoshop's invented, you get miracles again. It's a little silly and hyperbolic, but Why Won't God Heal Amputees is a real thing, because If in fact this story is properly documented, then we have a good record of a limb growing back. What we don't have is any explanation for how or why that limb grew back. We have nothing. It wasn't done at a prayer and healing thing. It wasn't done at any time of any significance. It wasn't done in any way where a god could potentially show off. At least when I was reviewing the Marlene Klepp story, it was, okay, she's in a facility and there are doctors there actively. They were there the day before with her, and now the day after she's walking around and pushing her wheelchair and stuff like that. This is now further removed in time from both modern abilities to investigate and medicine to 2.5 years between the incident and the healing. No, I mean, he said he was having a dream of Our Lady of the Pillar, but that's, we can't confirm any dream vision or Christophany or anything of that type. And it seems more plausible that this guy was a grifter who got drunk and passed out and his mom caught him. I don't know how that's not like almost the most obvious explanation. I came up with that explanation before I even read Dunning's proposed explanation. And so here we are coming up with at least one plausible scenario that was very similar. But let's give everything the benefit of the doubt for just a moment. And let's say that everything's recorded correctly. And these doctors, or even more, we know more about it, that these doctors absolutely cut off his leg 4 fingers below the knee, and that it grew back over a 30-minute period in his parents' bedroom while he was asleep. How do you demonstrate what the cause is for this? How do you demonstrate that any god did anything? At best, you have a completely unexplained event. And if this is enough to actually confirm a particular healing god, then why doesn't that god just run around healing anybody and everybody right now? I mean, this healing does nothing to add any credibility to any god. This healing could have been used for, any number of things. It doesn't make any sense. The I'm a grifter who got caught by his mom story is far more plausible. So why is it, if theists are convinced that this is sufficient evidence to conclude that there is a God and that God heals people, then why does God keep hiding? Well, that's the story for the next video. Thank you all for tuning in and watching, and we'll get back to God being the world champion of hide and go seek just a little while. Bye-bye.